University of Oregon, and he's going to be talking about functional behavioral assessment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, good morning. I'm Mark's monitoring my vital signs and a number of other implements that I have here. So rest assured, if I get a little nervous, he'll contact the right people. But Sherry was a little bit right in that I'm from the University of Oregon. I did my doctoral work there, and that's where a lot of my research was. But I'm actually teaching now at Portland State University, so about 2 hours up the road. So I do have a lot of still relationships with University of Oregon, and some people still think I'm there, and that's okay. I don't mind being considered a duck. But I wanted to give you guys quickly all of the materials that Sherry has provided for you, and probably a little bit extra, because I kind of overkill things sometimes, are available at the basic FBAPBworks.com website. I'll actually show you that in a few short minutes. But and those of you that are trying to get online here, this is the access code. I'm not sure if I'm totally allowed to give that away, but there it is, okay? So you guys can get online, but none of you are going to, check your email or Facebook or anything unless there's a really exciting point that I make, and then you're gonna share that and there'll be a Twitter feed, right? But no. All right, so I'll tell you more about me later, but I wanna know who's here. I got a little bit of a snippet from Sherry on who you all are, but who kind of plays a role of like administrator, so managing the programs, or nobody here? Oh, a couple of you. Okay, great. Teachers in the classrooms? Okay, number of you. Are there any paraprofessionals here? Great, I'm glad you're here. People playing the role of behavior specialists, and however you want to call that. Okay, great. Other related services, maybe speech and language therapists or social workers. Okay, a number of you there. Is there somebody that I forgot that plays a specific role? No? All right. Well, you guys are all valued. Very important work you guys are doing. I wanted to kind of see how many functional behavior assessments have you conducted. So 0 to 3, raise your hand if you've done 0 to 3. Okay. Keep your hand up if you've done 4 to 10. Keep your hand up if you've done about 11 to 20. Keep your hand up if you can't count anymore. All right, so those are the people. Come on up, and you guys can now have the microphone. No. So I'll give you a quick snapshot of who I am in a square and a circle. I'm originally from Hawaii. Went to the University of Hawaii there, and then went to San Francisco State, where I got my master's degree and did all of my teaching in schools. I worked at Ravenswood City School District in East Palo Alto, California. I don't know if any of you know where that is, but Coolio and Dangerous Minds very much made it popular, and Michelle Pfeiffer. I was looking for her the whole time, couldn't find her. But so that's where I worked for 6 years, and really helping them transform their systems, supporting students with significant disabilities and inclusive placements. So a lot of my work is with students with significant disabilities. Then went over to the University of Oregon, did my doctoral work, and now I'm at Portland State. My areas of expertise and research are around instructional practices for persons with significant disabilities, positive behavior support, and educational systems change. And I've done work and continue to do work in those areas. But just to kind of give you a snapshot of who I am. So I'm going to quickly jump into the goals and outcomes. So my hope is by the end of today that you'll be able to do these things. Be able to use the practical FBA, BSP manual, process, and materials in order to train other people in this technology. Okay? So we're going to walk through the materials. A lot of it's not, for those of you that have done FBA before, it's not going to be new. Okay? But what we've done is really taken apart what's a rigorous, very complicated process at times, and made it very practical so that teachers, school-based personnel, we even train paraprofessionals to implement FBA efficiently. So I want you to be able to guide a school staff through activities to teach them how to specifically define behavior, identify variables that trigger problem behavior, and determine the function payoff of student problem behavior. My hope is that you'll be able to model and guide school staff on how to conduct a functional assessment checklist for teachers and staff interview. Okay, and we'll talk about that. And teach school staff the critical features of a behavior support plan that will make student problem behavior irrelevant, inefficient, and ineffective. So I have a large task in the next 4.5 hours or so. Okay, so I want to make sure that you walk away being able to do these things. So here's our agenda. We're in the middle of the introduction right now. Then after that, we'll talk about the key points to the first 3 parts of the trainings. We'll have our break. Then from 11 to 12:15, we'll talk about part 4 of the training. During lunch, kind of a semi-working lunch where I want you to think about what we talked about, come up with an action plan of how to use this manual and these techniques. And then at the end, we're going to do a review, and my hope is that you'll have some time to practice. So look through the materials and be prepared to deliver them. Okay? So that's our agenda for today. The basic FBA wiki. And you'll see me interchange the terminology, and I apologize in advance. You started out as the practical FBA. To me, it still is the practical FBA, but academics, you know, kind of mince words and dissect everything, and they say, well, Sheldon, you can't quite call it practical because a number of other reasons and long-winded answers. So the new term for it is going to be basic FBA, but you'll see me, and I might always call it practical FBA, just my little rebelliousness there, okay? So, so you'll see me interchange it. I'm talking about the same thing, practical FBA, basic FBA. I've made a wiki here for all the materials with the presentation as well as the materials that you need to go ahead. So I'm going to show you it really quickly, okay? It's very exciting. See all the, actually it's a pretty boring website. So there is a link to the original version, Practical FBA. And so that actually has a lot of historical information, and it also has a trainer or trainer's manual and a bunch of other stuff there. So you can follow along there if you want. But the new and improved manual and all the materials that you need is definitely on this website, okay? And so the slides that I'm going through today are here. The manual, the slides, so you can go ahead and deliver these are here. The forms and quick reference guide, so for once somebody's done with the training, or for yourself, you can go and quickly go there, and you don't have to go through all the slides, the whole 150 pages, however long the manual is at this point, okay? And then the action plan that you guys are going to fill out for the workshop is on there. So I just wanted to orient you all to that. All right. Any questions so far at this point? No? All right. So I'm going to quickly give a refresher for those of you that are familiar with FBA. But the primary goal of FBA is to guide the development of effective, positive interventions based on the function of behavior, thus functional behavior assessment. Okay? So we're really looking at what are students getting or avoiding. Is it something tangible? Is it something social? Okay? Is it automatic, sensory? Okay? We know that FBA is a supported process in the literature. There's a number of studies that support the idea of using function-based interventions and that they are effective for helping students. Okay? I was told to never talk about research without showing a picture. So I'm going to show you a picture here. And Ingram, Lewis, Palmer, and Sugai, just to convince you of all the things that I just said, right, did work on looking at function-based interventions versus non-function-based interventions. And what we see here is a student having some problem behaviors. The function-based intervention is implemented, those behaviors go down. A non-function-based intervention is implemented. Problem behaviors look back to where they were. They go ahead and re-implement the plan based on the function. Behaviors go down, then they go back and reintroduce it to convince you guys for another time, and we reintroduce the function-based intervention. And so you see there the idea that a lot of times our non-function-based interventions aren't going to get the bang for the buck that we need, and we need that a lot in our schools. There's another interesting study, and probably one of the impetus for my real passion for function-based interventions. Newcomer and Lewis, if you see here, they did it on a number of 3 students here, and the problem behaviors in baseline, you'll see those across students. Now what they did is they did a non-function-based intervention, so something that the staff came up with, okay, and they implemented it. And do you see a problem with number 1, Matthew? We have problem behavior here. They went and implemented an intervention. And guess what happened to the problem behavior? It went up. In fact, 100% one day, right? That's major stuff for me, okay? Because, you know, the road to hell can be paved with good intentions sometimes, right? And so they did eventually do a function-based intervention. Those behaviors went down, and we see again that for those other students it was effective. But, you know, I think we need to have our teachers take the Hippocratic Oath, kind of like how doctors do, right, and do no harm. And so I think that's where my passion for function-based interventions is the idea that if people are not coming up with behavior support plans based on the function of behavior and really looking at those critical features that we're going to talk about today, they may actually do harm, okay? So we don't want to be those people, and we definitely don't want to perpetuate that. So we really want to teach them how to look at the function of behavior, how to prevent problem behaviors from occurring, and of course, how to respond effectively to make sure that we are reinforcing students and not letting that problem behavior pay off, but that alternate behavior that we want will pay off, okay? So, Dean Fixon, I love his work. The things that I'm going to talk about to you all today are not new. In fact, you know, research has shown that they're effective, but the challenge that we have is that not finding what works, but now implementing what works in the schools. We've tried to do functional behavior assessment since 1997 in schools, and expert after expert after expert has said we can't do it in schools. Teachers cannot do function-based intervention. We've trained them, they can't do it, okay? Well, probably because we were trying to train them to become behavior analysts and become experts in behavior, and teachers don't have time for that, okay? So we really need to give them what works. And so we've kind of taken the philosophy of Terry Scott and colleagues. I'm a big fan of Terry Scott. And the idea of scaling down to scale up. So we kind of have to not make it so complicated and rigorous, even though we want to, but to really apply it in the schools, we need to actually simplify it and make it so that people can use and apply what we're doing and what we want them to do. So straightforward language, rationale, and examples of how FBA can be applied in the context of a classroom. And that's what the practical basic FBA manual and process does. So those of you that are behavior specialists or definitely are having to work with a number of students that have problem behaviors, you know, it's still early in the school year, but I'm sure around October or November, you're going to be trying to put out fires. You're going to be overwhelmed. Okay, and the basic message that I have for you all that are getting overwhelmed, and what the research says is whenever you're overwhelmed, you need to invest in training other people. Okay, and I know a lot of us like to play that role of hero. I was one of them, right? I wanted to do all the behavior plans and solve all the behavior problems, but I was not going to get to every student. And so I had to figure out how am I going to train more people to think this way and to implement interventions the way that needs to be done. And so that's the basic message. Definitely those of you that are playing that role have that role of training and coaching around classroom management and helping out classrooms, supporting teams and building the behavior support plans. But I really want you guys to think of this starting to be your role, okay? Think of that school that you continue to go and you develop behavior plans for them. Think of that school and say, I'm going to invest in 1 to 2 people in that school, and I'm going to teach them this process. I'm going to spend 4 hours, instead of 4 hours times 20 of the number of students that I'm going to have to do a behavior support plan on, right? I'm going to spend 4 hours and train those 2 school staff on how to conduct basic FBA and BSP. And then they'll, hopefully the number of students that I have to do an intensive functional behavior assessment on is on one hand. And the rest, the school staff can work on and take care of. And so that's the hope, to really build capacity. And so really start thinking in that direction. So things to think about is, do you already have people who know FBA in your schools? If you do, okay, put a check mark. Okay, do you have a district leader or behavior specialist that can teach FBA procedures in a reasonable amount of time? Okay, so school staff do not have that much time, so we need to be able to train them pretty efficiently. Are the basic FBAs developed by the school personnel that we've done these trainings on, are they valid for building behavior support plans? So the ones that you see that school staff are doing, do they make sense? Do they work? Are they effective? Okay. Do your school teams, when they sit down and talk about interventions for students, do they really address the critical features that need to be in a behavior support plan? And are they really looking at the function of behavior? And then the last question is, do you have materials that are practical and effective for use by a district behavior specialist or somebody well-versed in functional behavior assessment? Okay? So these are the questions that I want you to ask, and my hope is that by the end of today that you'll at least have a plan to get there. Okay? Giving you the materials to get there, and hopefully the process to get there. And so my hope is that you will be able to answer yes to these next year this time or so. Okay? So I do a lot of mnemonics, and I do a lot of playing with alliteration. Always gets me in trouble. But came up with this a couple weeks ago, and we really want our school staff to work smarter, not harder. We know all of you all have a lot on your plate, so we don't want to bombard you with a lot of paperwork and a lot of things to do, but we really want to make your jobs easier and make everybody else's jobs easier. So we really want to work smarter. And we'll talk about the 4 Ps, okay? So we want to proactively build capacity. So it's going to take some time on the front end, but being proactive and build capacity within your schools. So train those 1 to 2 people, like I said, who have, and we call them flexible roles in your schools. So somebody who actually has the capability to interview a teacher and go ahead and observe a student. So not people that are necessarily tied to a classroom that have to be with 30 plus kids every hour of the day, but those people, for example, like your counselors, your administrators, maybe specialists, teachers on special assignment, or whatever their roles might be in your district, but really training those people so that they can actually go and do these things. We want to have parsimonious tools, and the idea there is we want to have simple tools that people don't have to really spend a lot of time trying to figure out and taking hours to complete an FBA. Okay? We want them to be relatable to school personnel. We want to have practical trainings. Okay? So being able to do what I'm doing to you all today may not be practical to your school district or to your school or to the teachers that you're working with. Right? They might not have the time to sit here like you guys. So the idea of teaching less, more thoroughly. So we've done 1-hour chunks, and we spend time teaching for 1 hour, making sure student or staff understand what we're trying to teach them, and then give them a chance to practice that in their own classrooms, and then come back about a week later, or however, whatever your time span is, and train them on the second session. And that's the design of how we've done this. Other people around the world have done this different ways, and they chime in and let me know how they're doing it. But what we found the most effective is to have 4 sessions and spend about 60 to 90 minutes doing that session, send them home with the homework, and then have another session the next week or close in proximity, follow up on their homework, then do the next session, and until you get to the 4th session. And so that's the design of it, because one, when we try to teach everybody, and a lot of you guys are going to be at around 1 o'clock saying, oh my gosh, I'm tired of that guy's voice, just be quiet, right? Whenever we try to train for a long period of time, we lose people. And so the idea is short stints, teach less more thoroughly, and providing feedback. A lot of activities for participants. And so that's the idea here with the practical trainings, teaching less more thoroughly, and then prioritized follow-up. So you'll see on the website that there is a reference to a pre-test and a post-test, and places in Virginia, Vancouver, British Columbia, and Australia have been using that at the beginning and the end of their training, one, to understand where are their participants, and at the end, did they really learn this stuff? And some of them don't. We can't, catch everybody. We kind of say if they're above 80% by the end, you've done a pretty good job with your training. But there's going to be people that fall under that 80%. And what they've done in Virginia and Australia is prioritize then, because even the trainers don't have enough time to go and coach everybody. But those people that are under 80%, they go and prioritize then their coaching and make sure that they understand the content, because 4 hours was not enough for them. Does that make sense? So being able to use tools to guide our practice. So those are the 4 Ps. I'm going to jump into then the practical FBA training series. Can you guys all hear me? Okay, great. So what it is, I kind of alluded to it already, is 4 training sessions on conducting functional behavior assessment. It was designed for students with mild to moderate behavior problems, so not students that are experiencing pervasive problems throughout the day or self-injurious behaviors. We still believe that experts should then be called in to help out with those cases. We don't want to overwhelm people and make them feel like they have to be an expert within the 4-hour training that we provide them. Okay? The training series teaches how to conduct interviews, how to conduct observations, and then how to bring that information together in what we call a summary statement or hypothesis statement that really looks at the function of behavior. So then to inform a school team on how to come up with interventions. And the idea here is that not just one person comes up with interventions, that this person who's done the FBA brings it to the team, and the team works together to develop interventions. Now that one person that's versed in FBA will help that team and maybe even show that slide that I said, oh, that doesn't match the function. Okay, we got to think of a different intervention there. Okay, so that person should help guide the team and say, that doesn't work. And we're going to talk about that later on today of why things may not work. Okay, but we really try to demystify our behavioral language. I don't always do such a great job at that, but we want to have teachers to think about so the problem behavior, and really start there. Okay, so I'm not going to start talking with you until I understand what are you talking about. Okay, that's the problem behavior. Now I can work with that. Then we want to find out the when and where that occurs and the why. Okay? And by the end, you'll help a team to come up with an intervention that prevents the problem behavior from occurring, that teaches alternative or what we call replacement behaviors, and how to effectively respond to problem behaviors. Okay? So that's what the 4-part practical FBA or basic FBA training series does. It's focused on individuals with mild to moderate problem behaviors, so not dangerous or occurring in many settings. I have had a number of people come up to me and actually say they do use it for that, but I'm not going to advocate for that. But the methods are pretty much the same. Okay? So you probably could, but again, if you're training school personnel who aren't well versed, I don't want you to put that burden on them. They will be able to work with students to have mild to moderate problem behaviors. That it should be a relatively simple and efficient process, and school-based personnel, teachers, counselors, administrators have been able to do this. And so that's the focus of the training series. Now for comprehensive FBA, so students who have moderate to severe behavior problems that are dangerous, we have a time-intensive process for that. We want to make sure that they know how to access their experts to help them out with those things, and they should be trained to conduct functional assessments with students with severe problem behaviors. So school psychologists or behavior specialists should then be called in, and whoever plays that role for your school or for your district. Okay? All right. So what is the practical basic FBA process? We use the mnemonic DASH to guide participants along the process. It's inspired by Incredibles, Might lose a lot of you here, but I'm a dad of 2 little ones, and The Incredibles, one is actually a cool cartoon that I can watch. So Dash was actually our probably prototypical student that was engaging in problem behaviors, but not major. And if that doesn't do it for you, at least remember DASH, okay? So we're going to start with defining the behavior in observable and measurable terms, okay? Asking about the behavior by interviewing staff and student, where they will specify the routines, the where and when behaviors occur, then summarizing the where, when, and why behaviors occur. And every step of the way, they are going to summarize behavior, okay? Then, after they ask, they're going to go ahead and see the behavior. You're going to train them how to do that, how to observe during those specified routines, and how to observe to verify that summary that they got from asking. And then finally, they're going to be taught how to come up with a hypothesis and really come up with a final summary of where, when, and why behaviors occur. And the way the training is structured is, session 1, we're going to teach them how to define behavior. Remember, teach less, more thoroughly. Okay, today I'm going to teach you all of this at once, and it's going to be overwhelming. But the first session, you're just going to teach them how to define behavior. You're going to practice that. Okay? Then the second session, teach them how to ask. Teach them how to interview and ask those follow-up questions. Then the third session, we're going to teach them how to observe. And finally, our last session, coming up with hypothesis and actually looking at behavior support interventions, okay? And we're going to walk through all of those. I'm going to give you a quick snapshot of each of those trainings. The way they're structured are based on what we know of good practice for teaching students and actually teaching everyone. You want to make sure it's clear, concise. Each session is broken up with objectives, okay? And this is page 5, and those of you that are following along if you want to. There are objectives for each session. There's a review. So every session has a review from the previous session to make sure that you're getting that information, reviewing that information that they already have learned. There are activities built in for participants to have an opportunity to practice, so they won't be sitting around kind of like how you guys are right now without engaging with the content. But you want to keep it quick, keep the pace going, have a lot of activities, and those are built in there. At the end of the training, because we do a lot of quick activities that are with partners, we want to know how each individual does. So we have a checks for understanding that they complete on their own, and they actually submit it to you as the trainer. Okay? So they'll complete that, and then looking at that information, you'll see, oh my gosh, I did not do a good enough job explaining that topic, or wow, they got this. Good, my review for next session is going to be very short. Okay? So it's going to inform your next training on what things you need to recover or things that you can go on to. And because they're so quick, even though I love dialogue, we ask them to write comments and questions on that checks for understanding so that the trainer can then look at that and address that at the beginning of the next training or at the end if they have time, but really that they'll write that down and the trainer keeps on going with their routine. There are tasks for each session, so a take-home kind of homework assignment that participants have and key points to remind them of what they did. So in part 1, the defining and understanding behavior, the dash part, that's the pages 7 through 17 in the manual. And the objectives here are you're really teaching, 1, what the whole training series is about. Okay, so they understand what they're getting themselves into and what the process is going to be, so they won't be very discouraged that all they learned was how to define behavior in the beginning. Okay? Then you're going to then teach them how to define behavior, how to then identify events that predict the when and where, how to identify the function of behavior, and how to start to construct summary statements. Because every other training after this point is then they're going to come up with a summary statement. And so we're just introducing these concepts to them. Their task at the end of this first session is pretty simple. Find a teacher or a buddy who's having a student with some problem behaviors and say, hey, next week after I get trained on how to ask you, can I interview you? Okay, so they don't even have to do the interview yet, just more of making a connection. Part 2 then, or session 2, is looking at how to investigate the behavior, so how to ask. And this is pages 18 through 39, where you're going to review the content from the first session. Then you're going to provide instruction, modeling, and practice opportunities on how to do the functional assessment checklist for teachers and staff, the FACS. How many of you are familiar with the FACS? Okay, a few of you. Okay, we're going to walk through that a little bit. In fact, probably in a few short seconds. So rest assured, we'll talk about that. But the training guides participants through how to do a FACS, how to ask follow-up questions. It has a script for them to role play. So one person plays the interviewee, one person plays the interviewer, but of course they got to follow, the interviewee has to follow the script, okay? And so we can check to see if they ask the right questions to get that information. And then at the end of the session, they practice constructing a behavioral summary statement based on this interview. So at the end of this session, they're asked to go home, go to school, find the teacher, again, that they made a connection with, and go ahead and practice doing that interview that they practiced with. And bring that back to the next session, and we're going to talk about that. So if you turn to, I think it's page 20, hopefully I have the pages right, in your big handout. This is the Fax Interview Form, and we're going to spend some more time really unpacking it, but I wanted to introduce you all to it, so at least understand what I'm talking about. And it's a 2-pager. There's a part A and a part B. And so in the part A, I kind of call it the idea of you're opening the hood of the car. You're getting a big picture. And then your goal is to narrow that down. And so you'll ask about the routine for the student, prioritize those routines there. And then on the second page, now you're just going to use those routines that you identified, not everything else. I'm glad you're talking about PE, but you didn't identify that as a problem right now. So I'm going to focus on the reading and math activities, okay? And really break it down, so then you are coming up with a summary statement at the end of your interview, and you will ask the person you're interviewing, on a scale of 1 to 6, how well does this explain the student's behavior? Okay? So that's what the FACS does. We'll unpack that a little bit more. But the FACS that we use in the Practical FBA is a little bit different than some other people's. We really guide the interviewers to ask follow-up questions. So they're prompted on if the teachers have identified a number of them to rank order which of those tasks, for example, are too hard, and then ask specific questions. So describe in detail what is that task that's too hard, okay? For independent work, what does independent work really look like? And really getting to the core of what's going on. And so the FACS that we use in the Practical FBA really guides the interviewer to ask those follow-up questions that we know we should ask, but you may not think about it at the time. So it prompts them along. Okay? So once they've learned that on how to ask, we don't stop there. We actually then say we have to go and see and observe. And so part 3, we focus on teaching about the ABCs and observing the ABCs. Okay? And they actually have practice using video, which we'll practice soon. Okay? And they also, at the end of this session, come up with a summary statement as well. So everything is leading to a summary statement, and they're guided to think that way every step of the way. And then their take-home assignment is within that next week or whenever your next training is, to do an ABC observation and bring that back, and we can see how people did on that. Okay? So we use videos from Terry Scott and colleagues. Have any of you guys seen these videos? Some of you? All right, well, we'll see some of them today. They're available from Sopris West. That's the one thing I couldn't post on the website. I will make them available to you, Sherry, and I have a flash drive for you. So, they're recording this, so I won't tell her anything else. We'll talk about it later. But they are available from this DVD, okay? So how the ABC recording form works, a lot of you are probably familiar with the ABC form that you've had to do in the past. And this is very much like that, except different, okay? So what you're going to do is, you see the grade in part, and we'll practice this, hopefully. That comes from that interview that you just did. So that summary statement that the participants did, that doesn't get thrown away and put in the file. No, we use that summary statement, we put it right here in the gray part here. So when we do our observation, we're looking for those things. Okay, that's a hypothesis that we're testing now. And then you will then complete your ABC recording form just like how you would in the past. You will write in, and it's all narrative, write in when the behavior occurs. So the student threatened another student. He says, "I'll excuse you right in the mouth, you dork." Okay? And then what happened before that? Well, it was actually before class. The student bumped him. What happened after? The peers actually ignored him. The next problem behavior occurs. I write that in. I look at what happens before. I ignore, for the most part, these check boxes while I'm doing the observation. And that's how we train participants. So go ahead and do the narrative like you normally would, the ABC. But at the end, we ask them, which one of these does this match? So before class starts, is that large group, small group, independent work, unstructured time? Okay, check that off. Which one does this match, the antecedent? Is it with peers? Yes. Transition? Okay. And what we use that for is a frequency count. So at the end, you can actually go ahead and tally up and look at the percentages here if you wanted to, and really see which ones occurred the most. Okay? And you'll take that information. They don't have to come up with a frequency count, by the way, and that's the cool part about this process. It's people who love the narrative part, great, narrative part works. Those of you that love the narrative and the frequency count, great, that works. The idea, though, is by the end, you have to come up with a hypothesis statement, and you need to be convinced. And that's how we train our participants, to become investigators that are convinced. We don't come up with hardline rules of you have to observe for 30 minutes or anything like that. We do have some quick guidelines. We want them to see the behavior at least 5 times. Okay? And if they're convinced after seeing the behavior occur 5 times, great. If they're not, well, guess what? Go back again. Okay? So they come up with a summary statement, and then they ask themselves, how well does this explain the behavior? And if it's a 4 or less, and this is the way we train it, you need to come back again, or you need to do another interview because you're not quite convinced. Okay? And that's the third session. In part 4, which we'll walk through a lot today, is we review the first 3 parts of the training. Then we really bring that together to really teach positive behaviors that will replace the problem behavior. Teach them how to use antecedent strategies to prevent that. We also teach them how to correct and extinguish problem behavior efficiently, and then come up with reinforcement of those replacement and desired behaviors. At this point, their task is kind of to go off and do this. Okay? Now, those of you that are coaching can have a plan to follow up with them. But really, we focus on that last session of developing a competing behavior pathway, where we look at that summary statement that they got from their FBA, and then we teach an alternate route or replacement route, and also how are we going to get to that desired route. We teach the idea that our interventions need to be based on the function, all of them. Okay? So with this summary statement then, that function should guide those alternative replacement behaviors. That the function should guide how we prevent problem behaviors from occurring. Okay, so that needs to, our strategies beforehand need to match the function of behavior. And of course, our consequence strategies, our reinforcement strategies need to match and be based on the function of behavior. So another mnemonic that I came up with in the theme of DASH is RACER, to help people remember this process. So there's Dash again, if you forgot who he was. Okay, and this is something that we just actually done some new research on. So rest assured, the things that I'm talking to you about, we've actually tested. Based on recent research, that we're going to teach participants in this 4th session to R, replace the problem behavior with socially acceptable, efficient behavior that allows the student to obtain the payoff of the function. Then the A, we're going to teach them to use antecedent strategies to directly, to directly address the triggers, common mistake people make, and to prompt those replacement behaviors that we just came up with, based again on the function of behavior. It's all about that. We teach them how to correct those behaviors by quickly and efficiently redirecting the student to that replacement behavior. Then we teach them to extinguish those behaviors and come up with strategies for that so that the problem behaviors no longer pay off. And in the meantime, we also make sure that we reinforce those replacement and desired behaviors that we're teaching. Again, all based on the function. And so RACER is what guides that session 4. So they start off with dash and they get to RACER. Okay? So I'm going to quickly go through these things around the research around this very quickly because I don't want to lose too many of you.